keep it on this three-part view. What was that? Okay. O- Okay. Got it. Okay, so today I thought I would go into a little bit more detail on what I call the core actions, or they're the activations inside of high quality standing posture. So the muscle activations required to align your structure in a way that's most easeful, so that gravity is causing the least amount of strain on your muscles to hold yourself upright. So we'll start in doing that in a bridge pose, and then we'll do some activations in lying to find this quality of effort that I call effortless effort. So you're taking the activation and making the muscles engage, but they're not engaging like 100%, where the muscles are really squeezing and fully engaged, and they're not engaged at all and have no energy running through them, but rather they're engaged and energized in a way that effort is being made, but it's not all the way moving to 100% effort. It's more like 40 to 60%. So an activation without over engagement. Hi, Jennifer. Glad you could join us. uh, um, So we'll go over that, and I'll do a few demos before we get started, so that once we get started, you can be kind of in your own feeling self instead of, checking the screen to see if you're doing it right. You've had like a previous point of reference for what it is we'll be doing, and that you're in the right general pose, because as externally as we do this, it'll look like we're just in, three basic poses, but I'll be giving lots and lots of detail of what's inside of that pose that's going to get the activation that we're looking for when we finally come up to standing at the end and review all of that. So, okay. So a bridge pose, and we'll do it with the feet together since everyone doesn't have blocks, but this is a bridge pose, and I'll say generally, if possible, your feet are right underneath your knees. So your shins are pretty perpendicular to the floor. And from there, your feet are together and your knees are together, if that feels okay. If that doesn't feel okay, you can take them just a little bit apart. Good. And then with the feet in this position, the palms will be grounded down at your sides, and we'll go over all the other positions from there. After we review lots of details in this position, we'll a few times flow in and out of bridge, just like this. And then while holding all those activations, and then we'll extend the legs out long and really relax. And then we'll talk about, in more detail, standing foot and standing leg. Let's make sure you can see my feet. So a standing foot activation will start at the foot, and you'll engage through the four corners of the foot, and that will turn on all the muscles of the legs, including the glutes. And on an exhale, you'll relax that effort. And so we'll do that several times so that you can have a chance to feel for this quality of activation that is an effortless effort. We'll do that, and we'll practice our standing posture here with the support of the ground with all of those activations, so that when we come up to standing and do it, you have a point of reference for what it feels like to do it in a really supportive way on the floor first. So, yes. Yeah, it's that's where this kind of idea of effortless effort comes forward. So we're trying to create an effort with the foot, so that the muscles wrap around the ankle and all the way up the leg. There's this spiral dynamic that creates the stability in your leg. So not an over, if it feels like strain, then it's too much, and back off slightly until you can feel that it's engaged and active, but not gripped up or any pain. And a lot of this, depends on previous injury and all sorts of different things that are going on with your specific body. But anything else to add to that? Yeah, 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 yeah. Sure, yeah. So we'll be talking about this concept of activation called effortless effort. So you're not engaged to 100% and you're not engaged at all, but you're energizing and activating the feet and the legs and the glutes and all the muscles in the torso to stabilize with this quality of effortless effort. So it's energized and engaged, but not strained and not released. And this is really a felt relationship to, what the heck I'm talking about. So you'll feel as we go through that, oh, my quad has the tendency to go to 100% effort right away, but my glutes don't turn on at all. And what we're trying to do is balance that out so that the whole leg is having the muscles hugged to the bone to support and stabilize in your standing pose. And I correlated this for y'all to a standing desk, or if you're moving from seated to standing, that if you were to consider these alignments as you're setting up your space and standing, it's difficult to do it for, your full 8-hour workday or however long you're standing there, but doing small bouts of this focused posture can really help to support. And why posture is important for stress management is you could, especially this part that we'll talk about, the head ramp. So the one place where the muscular system really intertwines with the nervous system is right here at the occiput joint. And so if the forward head position has become habituated, it's a trigger for the nervous system that something's not all right in your body. So simply by aligning the head, and the rest of the structure kind of falls into place based on head alignment, it can send a signal to your body that everything is safe and stable in your structure, so that you'll be present and relaxed in your work rather than feeling stressed and you don't know why. Anything else, RJ? Okay. They're probably muted. They're in there. Who's? You're welcome. Okay. All right. So you're all there on your back, and I'll go into the postures as necessary to demo, but I may also come out so that I can see you guys and add a little bit of detail. So you're in your bridge pose with your feet in place, but just in a pretty relaxed way. You can even bring your feet out wide and your knees relax in towards each other so that you're pretty relaxed through the pelvis. And then your hands on your low belly. And as we always do, we'll start with breath work. So in this position, have your hands be a cue for this idea of bringing breath in and down so that the abdomen fills, and then the side ribs, and then it moves into the chest last. So we'll just take a few moments to sort of set in or get a feel for that breath pattern. Good. And as you're going, I'll speak a little bit more to why this particular breath pattern is what we're after. As you're inhaling, obviously we know physiologically the air is going into the lungs, but the diaphragm is contracting and moving down, and that's creating the action like your belly, as low as possible, even between the hip bones, is filling. And then as your diaphragm moves smoothly, it sort of can create this sensation of a rhythmic filling of the torso with breath. So through breathing in this way, we're gaining control and muscle control of the diaphragm, the ability to contract the diaphragm to pull air in, and the breath kind of fills low. And then on the exhale, the diaphragm relaxes. So see if you can move towards an exhale that just sort of happens without any effort. It's from this signal through the diaphragm moving in this way that your nervous system recognizes that all is well in your environment, because you're able to have this relaxed and passive exhale. If you haven't done much breath work before, it can feel like the exhale kind of doesn't happen or just drops off. Or if you're particularly stressed at this time, it could be that the diaphragm is kind of locked up or holding tension. So if that's the case and it feels like your exhale isn't complete, as you're exhaling, add effort to press the rest of the breath out so that the diaphragm descends or ascends completely and you're empty of air. Belly fills, and then breath moves into side ribs, and then filling into the chest and even into the upper back. So imagine that you could feel your lungs move backwards towards the floor, because they actually do. They fill back, and we can gain a lot more breath capacity by kind of feeling that fullness even towards the back of your body. So we have our activity of the inhale, a pattern filling from low to high, the passivity of the exhale, and the breath is simply leaving the body and you're adding effort as necessary to empty completely. Now we'll add a little bit of focus to the transition between inhale and exhale. So as you inhale and shift to exhale, be sure that there's no strain or you're not over efforting that space right before the transition to try to feel like you're breathing deeper. Keep the whole breath pretty effortless and easeful. So if it feels like your chest begins to move or your shoulders lift or your head moves at the end of the inhale, just end the inhale sooner and allow that transition to be really smooth. So for a few breaths, you're really focused on that transition between inhale and exhale. And then we'll shift our attention to focus on the transition between exhale and inhale. So after you're emptying completely on the exhale, there's a brief but effortless pause before the inhale arises in and down low in the belly. So as practices advance with me, we talk about all sorts of different patterns. So our current pattern is low to high and different rhythms. Our current rhythm is an inhale, no pause, an exhale, and just a heartbeat's passive pause before the next inhale. This is the breath rhythm at homeostasis. So we're sort of getting the cart and the horse all together and really creating this feeling of homeostasis by the way that we're breathing. Good. That's good. Yeah. The nervous system also tends to stay activated if we feel cold. So this will definitely be a pretty low-key practice. We'll be building a lot of internal heat. So if you're cold, socks or a blanket is good. Thanks, Wendy. Okay. So we'll keep this breath pattern and rhythm going for another minute or two. Belly, side ribs, upper back and shoulders. No strain in the transition. Passive exhale. And then a brief passive pause. before the next repetition. Good. Okay. And then we'll bring a little more attention to your feet, keeping that pattern and rhythm going. Bring your feet together and your knees together. So you'll be preparing for that bridge pose. So I'll do it here so you can see better. We'll activate and pay a lot of attention to the feet because the feet are hugely important in your postures. So we'll start by keeping the feet down and lifting the toes. And I'll do a little description of what I mean by the four corners of the feet, because I'll say that a lot. So the four corners of the feet are inside edge of the heel, and inside edge of the heel. And there's a tendency to sometimes press to the outside edge or only to the inside edge and fall through the arch. We're trying to keep equal effort through all of those four corners of the foot as you're gently grounding the foot down. Good, and we're either feet together or a little bit further apart, wherever it feels as close as you can have them together without it feeling uncomfortable. And the toes are lifted, and we'll think about wrapping the foot. So in ball of the foot grounds, and then it wraps around to the outside edge of the ball of the foot, and that wraps around the outer edge of the foot to the inside edge of the ball of the heel. So there's this sort of gentle wrapping action to ground all of those corners as the toes stay lifted. And then we'll just ground the big toe. So the rest of the toes will stay up and just the big toe grounds. So this is it's a strange feeling, but it's good to kind of make these focused efforts. It's building more and more connection to the muscles and the activity of the feet, which can become dormant because we stuffed them in shoes when we were 2.5 or something. So they've really been developing in shoes and we've lost a little dexterity of the feet. So give it a try. If it feels strange at first, just keep all of the toes lifted. The toes lifted has an effect of keeping the arch engaged. So, and the grounding of the toe does the same thing. It gives a little more stability to the foot, but it keeps the arch engaged. Lots of folks have fallen arches, which can be strengthened with focused effort. Go ahead. Yeah, so we're just waking up those feet. Give it a try. Yeah, that's painful. Okay, so four corners of the feet grounded, big toe, and the toes are lifted, except the big toe is grounded. So there's quite a bit of activity in the feet, and your mind and attention is down on the feet, and take a few of those rhythmic breaths. Good. And then we'll move to the pelvis. So bringing your hands to the front of your hip bones, keeping the feet gently activated in this way. We'll arch, tilt the back, tilting the pelvis down towards the pubic bone, down towards the feet. And then we'll press the low back down, toning the low belly as you exhale. So inhale, arch the back quite a lot. Exhale, press the low back down. And you're kind of moving in this breath connected way where the movement and the breath are one thing. As you inhale, pelvis tilts. As you exhale, you're kind of experimenting with the full range of motion of your pelvis. And as much as you can, keep the movement out of the chest and the head and the upper body and feel just movement at the pelvis. So this movement alone can help with low back pain, because a lot of times the pelvis is kind of held in a position that's straining the low back. So getting this range of motion of your pelvic tilt back and beginning to build a relationship with the low, deep core muscles can help with that. Okay, to find a neutral lumbar, we'll kind of use our hand as a guide. So take your hand and see if you can, on your next time, pressing back and down, feel that the hand is there to keep a gentle arch, and there's gentle pressure from the low abdomen to organize the pelvis, but there's still a bit of a curve, a bit of space there where you could fit your hands underneath. Because as we move forward, we want to maintain this neutral lumbar curve. So it's neither pressed all the way down or overarched, but rather balanced in between the two of those activations. So there's a little bit of effort required to hold it there. Everybody feel like they got it? Some point of reference? Good. Okay. And then so that will be held. Feet are still held. And now we'll move to the low ribs. Something that happens often in posture is that we start to release the pelvis forward and the low ribs jet forward also. So there's this big overarch in the back. In contrast, sometimes it can be the other way. There's like a flat back. We're trying to find this neutral spinal position that you can maintain and have reference for. So the front hip bones stay lifted, and bring your hands to the low ribs. Take a deep inhale through the nose and exhale through your mouth. And exhale completely, and you'll feel your upper transverse abdominis come on underneath your hands. And so the activation of that muscle is what's going to gently bring your rib cage kind of back towards the floor and reduce the amount of space between your mid back and the floor. So gentle curve in the low back, as much as possible, no space between the low ribs in the back and the floor. And that activation happens from the transverse here. So see if you can find that position using the exhale out of the mouth, and then release the effort slightly and hold the rib cage in that position and return to the pattern of breath, filling low to high and a passive exhale. So when you exhale out of your mouth, when you exhale out of your mouth, did you really squeeze the exhale out? So take an exhale out of the mouth and really squeeze it. Yes, good. And then just try to hold your rib cage in that position that is there. A lot of times, because there's so much sort of fine detail in there, you may not have conscious feeling of it, but as you continue to practice these things, you'll get more and more familiarity with it. Okay, so the next step is to broaden across the shoulders. So really spreading the shoulder blades and covering as much surface area with a broad back as you can. And then release your hands down next to your hips and lengthen the arms in two directions. So you're holding those positions we've reviewed so far, and the palms are grounding gently at your sides. And by the arms lengthening in two directions, I mean you're reaching down with the fingertips and gently opposing that by kind of reaching gently up at the head of the shoulder at the same time. So your arms are long, just a slight bend at the elbow, and broadened palms and a broadened back. So this will turn on the muscles of the upper back in a way that will support this area that tends to really have a lot of strain and tension because of desk life. So broadening across there and then softening that effort. And then the last position is the head and the head ramp, which we visited on our first session together, but we'll go into a bit more detail here on the ground. So the tendency is that there's the head is touching kind of higher, or we're released through the back of the neck because there's a lot of tightness in the backside of the neck. We're trying to lengthen that area by extending through the back of the crown and bringing the chin towards the center of the throat so that the natural cervical curve is in place and the lowest point possible on the head is what's touching the floor. So this is the head ramping action, and what that does is bring the cervical spine into alignment with the rest of the spine. And as I'm fond of saying, get your head on your shoulders. So, yeah. So I see you have a support there, and that's good. There's there's varying degrees that you could take the action. Just imagining that you're extending through the back of the crown and moving the chin towards the center of the throat to whatever degree you can that is pain-free, and that's your perfect position. Okay? Yeah. All right, so feet are together, and they're together and or slightly apart from together, but they're pointing the same direction. So the reason why I have you bring them together is so that they help each other align, so that the balls of the feet are touching and the heels are touching. And then when you spread them apart, try to keep that amount, that straightness of the toes pointing in the same direction down. Good. And then we'll reactivate all of those in sequential order. So grounding the four corners of the feet and lifting the toes, ground the big toe, find a balanced pelvis by lifting the front hip bones is the cue that I give. So a lot of times the pelvis will be in this overarched position. By lifting the front hip bones, we're coming into neutral lumbar and toning the low belly. And then exhaling out of the mouth, containing at the low ribs, broadening through the shoulders, ramping the head, grounding the palms, and lengthening the arms in two directions. And now breathe in and down with the pattern of low to high and a passive exhale, and hold all of those in place. And then see if you can notice areas that are over efforting and really straining to make this effort, and soften them gently, still holding the shape and having the subtle activation, but not straining. And also soften the jaw and the face. Good. Okay, so this sort of creates some containment up the front of the abdomen so that the breath can kind of move more up the back body. So rather than the belly filling up towards the ceiling, it's more so, you're feeling some movement of the abdomen low, but it's kind of continuously filling upwards in the side bodies and to the upper back. Good. We'll take 5 deep breaths here. See if you can refine the posture and count the inhales and count the exhales. How long is your inhale and how long is your exhale? Can you make it so that the inhale is just slightly shorter than the exhale? Good. Okay, so now with all of that activation inside of this bridge pose, we'll start to move with some breath-connected movement. We'll try to feel that as you're pressing through the feet, that the glutes engage to extend the hips, but you're not letting the back arch. You're keeping the front hip bones lifted, so there's this long spine. And then as you exhale, coming down, and inhale, coming up. Okay, I thought maybe it was a chat to me. Okay. Okay. So revisit all those activations, and on an inhale, you're pressing through the feet, lifting up into bridge, and on the exhale, coming down. And it's slow and progressive, so not feeling like you have to move into the full expression of bridge in the first repetition. More important is feeling the equal distribution of pressure through the 4 corners of the feet, noticing if the shoulders and the jaw grip up with effort, or if you can keep the work in the low body, in the glutes. So inhale presses up, exhale comes down, and in that passive pause after exhale, seeing if you can release the effort of the glutes completely, and then activate foot, and then glutes, press up, exhale, timing the movement and the breath, and then pausing. Okay, we'll keep moving in this way. And notice if any of those core actions that we reviewed, the grounded four corners of the feet, the lifted front hip bones, the rib cage contained, the shoulders broadened, the head ramped, if any of those core actions have a release valve where you release your head or let the rib cage go, and that's how you begin to build familiarity with your habituated posture. So the way you're used to holding yourself, and through lots of repetitions and additional supports, this gets more and more comfortable and easeful to hold all these core actions in place and really feel the glutes are doing the work to extend the hips. So as you're moving, all sorts of learning can happen about your habituated movement patterns. Do you tend to press more into the left foot versus the right foot? Does the rib cage release and create some strain in the low back? Can you keep the front of the core contained so that it's doing its part to support the low back? Do the glutes tend to turn off or engage in sort of a non-rhythmic way? Does like your right glute start first and then your left glute? So we're trying to sync everything up. Does your head release and the chin jet towards the ceiling? Can you keep just a moderate effort to keep the head with the lowest point possible touching the floor? Good. Next time you press up into bridge, hold up and soften the shoulders, soften the face, and keep the breath flowing in and down, and feel the majority of the work happening in the glutes and the backs of the legs. The feet are gently grounded through the four corners. And here you can begin to notice if you tend to drop to the inside edge of your foot or press with the outside edge of your foot, and keep remembering to feel all four corners. Good, and come down whenever you're ready. Good, we'll heel toe the feet out wide and bring the knees in towards each other the way we started, and then we'll do windshield wipers. So both knees go down into the left and you're really stretching the front of the hip. And then on an inhale, both knees come up to center, and exhale, both legs go down to the right. So this is a wonderful go-to at all times of day to really get hip extension and rotation through the spine and pelvis. So if you're having low back pain, this is a good go-to. So you basically just align yourself by finding that position with the feet wide and where the knees can still touch. Depending on if you have hypermobility, you'll want to be sure not to let that be where the knees are like dropping towards the floor. And then you're just moving in that rhythmic way, exhaling down and inhaling up. Okay. And next time that you go down and to the right and come up to center, pause. So you can kind of gauge the state of your nervous system with this movement too. When you first come to it, your legs may like flop back and forth and you're really not synced with your breath and movement. But as you slow down and connect movement to breath and re-bring your attention to your body, in standing with the legs long. So extend your legs long. And if it feels like your low back is a little cranky with the legs extended long, that could be because you have really tight quads. So lifting the front and placing the pelvis in neutral and then releasing the effort down can help to make this like legs extended long position more comfortable. Good. So I could say, call this organizing your pelvis in a way that supports no strain in the low back. So just like your desk is organized, right? Pelvis organized. So, so the legs are coming straight out from the hips and your attention is down on your feet. Take a big inhale and exhale and sort of let your weight get heavy on the floor. And then we'll start to sync movement and breath up together with the activation of the feet. So on an inhale, toes point towards the ceiling. You're creating that same action in the foot like we did in bridge, where your four corners are pressing down and your big toe is grounded and the rest of your toes are kind of lifted. And that's on the inhale, and on the exhale, all of that effort releases. So get the toes and the feet worked out. Inhaling, that engages. Exhaling, that releases. And then you may notice that there's some hyperextension at the knee that is habitual. See if you can soften that and engage the glutes as your foot engages. So it may not happen naturally without focused effort. So as your foot engages, gently engage both glute muscles, which is your butt muscles. And then as you exhale, release them. And we're trying to get it so that the foot engages, glute engages. And as your foot relaxes, glute relaxes. So through this calm and centered breathing, combined with this movement in this specific and intentional way, you can start to develop a movement pattern that really creates the support necessary for the pelvis and the low back to feel pain-free in your standing posture. So because of a lot of seated hours, the glute muscles kind of culturally have turned off. I don't know if this is too far, but we've become lazy asses. And so we've got to wake that butt back up. And this is the most simple way to do it, by feeling that when your foot is in a standing position, your glutes are engaged to support you and your front hip bones are still lifted. Good. And then the next time you inhale and engage the foot and engage the glute, pause and see if you can find that quality of effortless effort to this activation. So some things that can tend to happen is that the quads are really dominant and really engage and grip up, or the glutes want to turn off as soon as you stop thinking about it and you have to re-engage. See if you can find this stable, steady, consistent foundation through the legs, glutes, and pelvis. And breathe in and down and soften any amount of over-efforting that's possible to soften as you exhale, but maintain the engagement. Does anybody have any questions coming up about that? Yeah, so that's maybe a tendency, like it's a hyperextension, or what do you feel in the knees? Yeah, so just try to keep so try to keep the knees soft. Something that you can do is have a blanket or something as a rolled up blanket as a little support behind the knees so that they don't lock out. But this is what I would call a revelation, because if your knees are locking out here, then they're likely doing that in your standing pose all throughout your life. So if we can get the muscle memory sort of change to this soft knee bend and more support from the glute, it can lead to a lot more longevity for both your real knee and your fake knee. Yeah. Everything else. So just in sort of separate from this, working some ankle mobility. If you've had a lot of ankle injuries, I had a whole lot. And so the scar tissue and the muscle tissue is habituated in holding it to protect, just the same as Wendy's knee. So these are where all of our life experience and injuries sort of show up in the way that we're continuing to move. And the effort that we're trying to make is kind of to return to the original patterning or the original pre-injury, pre-trauma movement patterns, because that's what provides the most ease and the most longevity for your joints. So as best you can, just figure out how you can activate the foot without too much ankle, but really a lot of that work would come in other movements to soften the ankles. Okay, cool. All right, so we're finding a way that you can hold and stabilize this and keep breathing. And then on your next exhale, release all that effort and kind of let your glutes relax and legs relax. You could even shake your toes side to side to release any held tension through the legs. Yeah, shake it out. Good. Okay. So now we will come up to standing and visit all of these points while we're standing and reinforce some things. Uh-oh. I'm gonna have to be down. All right. So it's okay if I can't see you, as long as you can feel yourself. So the beginning of this is the feet. So look down at the feet. A lot of times with people, I have them use the block as a frame of reference for about how far hip width is. So there's all sorts of tendencies with the feet. This tendency, these ways, all these different ways that you could hold your feet. In this moment, we're doing our best to feel as though the inside edge of the feet are parallel at whatever distance you can. Good, and then that the toes are straight across the front. So one's not a little front of the other. You're looking down and your feet are all squared up. And this is important because this is the foundation of the alignment that comes into the knee and all the way up into the hip. So if we're standing in this way, it means that at the hip, the femur is rotated in the hip, and it has all sorts of consequences to the hip activation and alignment. So find alignment at the feet, soft bend in the knees, and ground the four corners of the feet. Good, and then lift the toes. Good, and feel, it may throw you off balance a little bit, but then try to redistribute the weight over the four corners of the toes, or the feet. And then ground the big toe. Good, so you can possibly feel that this keeps the arch lifted in a different way than sort of just a foot that we don't think about at all, and it's just sort of this brick. This is an active foot that's engaged down with the ground in a way that helps you receive a lot more information about the surface areas that you're walking on. Okay, and then from there, bring the attention to your legs and lift the front hip bones. So you're balancing the pelvis front to back. So there could be a sway back, there could be a flat back, but we're trying to, just like we did on the ground, find a balanced pelvis. And then the legs are lengthening in two directions. Good. Legs are lengthening in two directions. So by that, I mean you're both grounding down with the foot and lifting up at the hip. So there's this lightness as you ground down at the foot in the pelvis. And then bring your hands to the low ribs. Exhale out of the mouth and feel the rib cage stack right on top of the pelvis. Good, and then the shoulders are broad and the hands can be forward or back, but they're broadened just like they were on the ground. Good. And then the head is a movement of the chin towards the center of the throat and an extension up through the back of the crown. Good. So this is the action inside of, so a standard yoga pose is mountain pose. And this is it. We're standing tall and steady like mountains. But if I were to just say stand tall and steady, you would have all these patterns inside of that. But by taking these specific actions in this way, it may feel a little awkward at first, but this is how your structure will have the least wear and tear from your standing positions. So on your next exhale, let all that go. Forget everything, shake it out. And then we'll start at the beginning. Don't worry too much if I can see you. Just feel for yourself all these activations. I'll talk through them one by one. So 4 corners of the feet ground and the toes lift. Big toe grounds. Shift your weight slightly forward on your foot and slightly back on your foot a few times to feel what center is. So center yourself over the arches of your foot. And come to that centered place, and then lift the front hip bones and lengthen the legs in 2 directions. Ensure that the glutes are engaged here. If you're not sure, reach back and feel them. Are these guys on? Yeah. So if those muscles start to be habituated as being on in your day-to-day life, you're getting much more support for the spine. You can imagine the glutes as this foundation for the spine, and if they're habitually off, then your spine is really lots of other muscles up the way are trying to compensate for that. Good. So glutes are on, front hip bones lifted, balanced pelvis. And then rib cage is contained. So without this activation, the muscles in the back are holding the rib cage in place. When we take this activation to bring the rib cage over the hip bones, now those muscles can relax and only be used when necessary. They may feel kind of odd at first because they're so used to holding on. And then broaden the upper back and shoulders and lengthen the arms in 2 directions and broaden the palm. Like you're sending energy all the way down to your fingertips, your broadened hand. And really feel that the upper back and shoulders is engaged in that broadening process. So the scapula can just kind of set down the back. The scapula are those shoulder blades, little wings. See if you can set your shoulder blades down your back. Good. And then ramp the head, chin towards the center of the throat, extension up through the back of the crown. Good. And then breathe in and down, belly, side ribs, upper back, and shoulders. So after all of this work to align all of these different ways, just breathe in and feel what muscles tend to overactivate, what muscles tend to underactivate, and to regain your stability, remember feet and the activation of your feet. And after you remember feet, remember head. And from those 2 activations, everything else will kind of stack into place. Yes. Yeah, so this is a particular foot containment that is really keeping the arch engaged in a way that if not, then we're kind of letting the arch drop. So it's creating the activation in the foot for stability. And it's not something that you do all the time. It's something that you do when you're doing formal posture practice in the way that we're doing. But in your day-to-day life, just remembering feet and grounding the feet can have the same effect. Good. So for stress management purposes, if we were to think about all of the ways that your attention goes outward and you get wrapped up in all of the things that are happening that you need to do in this mental checklist, when it all becomes overwhelming, remember feet and ground your feet and occupy your body in this way. So take whatever wiggles you need, and for the last couple minutes, we'll do a meditation on posture. So we'll take all of these alignments and then hold them for 10 or 15 deep breaths and see what we can learn about the habitual way that you're tending to stand. Do your glutes turn off? Do you release the low ribs? Does your head want to drop forward? And that's where your continual work is throughout your work days, to remember, oh, if you're on your standing desk, it doesn't help so much to move from seated in a misaligned way to standing in a misaligned way. So we really want to emphasize all of the ways that you can really create this supportive structure and then be working from a standing position, because I've seen a lot of people move to standing and end up injured because they're spending now 8 hours a day standing and creating wear and tear at different joints in their body. All right, so one more time, get the shakes out. It's going to feel like a long time. 10 breaths in this posture. Good. Okay, so feet, grounding of the four corners of the feet, looking down, being sure that they're straight across and straight in the front. And this is important because of the alignment of the leg and hip. And then lengthen the leg in two directions and ground the four corners of the feet. Lift the front hip bones and ensure that the glutes are engaged. And you can have the toes lifted and the big toe grounded, or you can have the toes grounded. The main thing that we're watching for is that the toes aren't gripping up, like they're not trying to hold you in the standing position, that they're relaxed and they're sort of auxiliary balance when necessary. Good, and soft knees. So if you tend to hyperextend at the knees, can you soften the knees? Good. And then remember, they did, yeah. So see if with the glutes on, if your knees can feel a little more stable. So the stability at the knee actually comes from the ankle and the hip. So by grounding the foot and turning on the glute, you can provide a lot of the support so that not so much wear is happening at the knee. Good, and then ribs are contained and shoulders broadened. With this movement, you're kind of toggling between the two. So if you contain the ribs too much, the shoulders will dip forward. If you broaden the back too much, the rib cage will jet forward. So you're trying to find a place in between where both those actions are happening. And that's how you can find out where the edge of your activation is. And then broaden through the palms and extend through the back of the crown to ramp the head. Breath in and down, belly, side ribs, upper back and shoulders, active inhale. Passive exhale, softening anywhere that could be softened. So releasing any over-efforting, any of the concentrated focus at the eyebrows or the jaw tightening. Soften any unnecessary effort so that this is as easeful and comfortable as possible. Much of the reason we do posture practice in yoga is for a stable, comfortable posture, so that you're not using any more energy than is necessary for any given pose that you're in. And then let the breath and the sound of the breath be the focus of your meditation. Belly, side ribs, upper back and shoulders. Exhale, soften into your stacked bones and soften any over-efforting. And from this stable, contained place, you can begin to observe the mind and thought and quality of thought. Each time you inhale, you're aware of the belly, at the chest, and aware of thought, quality of thought. And each time you exhale, soften into your aligned and stacked bones and an easeful, stable posture. Good. We'll take 5 deep breaths in silence. Okay, on your next inhale, as though you were inhaling gratitude, fill yourself up with it. your strong, stable body and your steady rhythmic breath. Good job. This concludes our guided practice on stable, aligned posture. I'll stay on for a bit if you guys have any questions. Oh, kitty, kitty. I'm going to stop this other recording. Oh. Yeah. Well, I'll see you next week and hopefully you sooner than that. Okay. All right. Take care, y'all. Happy holidays.